So again, welcome to identifying and addressing the challenges of students with dyslexia, hosted by the School of Education at VCU. I would like to introduce our speaker this evening, Chris Mooney. Chris Mooney serves as the specialized reading and dyslexia specialist for the Virginia Department of Education. She began her teaching career as a bilingual classroom teacher and has served as a reading specialist, literacy coach, district coordinator, and professor of reading foundations at the graduate level. Her focus on improving literacy outcomes for all learners stems from the love of reading instilled in her as a student in a Title I school. When not beating the drum of the importance of literacy, Chris either has her nose in a book or is scanning the shelves of her local public library with her 6-year-old grandson. So welcome to the workshop, and thank you again, Chris, for presenting for us this evening.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for 100+ people being here on a snowy night to talk about literacy and dyslexia. I am in Williamsburg. It has been snowing since about noon, so we've got about 3 inches. And I can think of nothing I'd rather do than talk about literacy, if not doing some literacy myself. But today, what we're going to be talking about specifically is dyslexia. And so let me get my screen ready. There we go. And Lisa, if you can give me a thumbs up if we can see that, we'll get started. Excellent. So again, my name is Chris Mooney. I'm the Specialized Reading and Dyslexia Specialist for the Virginia Department of Education. And the first thing I want to do is find out a little bit about our 100+ folks who are in the room. So we're going to play a little game. What I want everybody to do, which is, kind of unusual, is I want everybody to turn your camera off. And when I shout out the category that you are as an audience member, go ahead and turn on your camera so we can see who's here. So let's start with parents or family members. So maybe we have some public school or private school families on today. Great. Y'all can turn your cameras off. What about students, college students, high school students, elementary, middle school students? Terrific. And general education teachers, pre-K-12. Hey, we see you. And what about our special educators? Wonderful, wonderful. Reading specialists. You're an elementary, middle school, high school reading specialist, maybe even a reading coach for your school or division. School division leaders, maybe we have some central office folks, or even some school leaders, some elementary or middle school or high school principals, assistant principals. And then our higher education staff. I know we've got lots of folks on today. And then if I did not count out your category, let's come on ahead and show yourselves as well. Maybe we have some community members or others who are joining us today. We're so glad that you are with us to talk about dyslexia. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to start with an overview of what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about dyslexia. We're going to go through some signs from little people to bigger people about what we might look for if someone may have dyslexia. And then we're going to talk about how it can be addressed with effective instruction. And then also look at how we can support our students at home as well as at school as they are engaging in learning to read and graduating from school. We'll end with some resources that you can leave for some websites and other resources that might be helpful. And if you have a question, you are welcome to toss it in the chat. What we're going to do is I've given Lisa kind of sole source to say if it's a question that really fits with one of our topics and it's timely before we move on, she's going to interrupt me with that question. Otherwise, we'll leave it at the end. The one thing I will ask is I want us to avoid the I have a child who questions. So if you have something specific about a child that you love, a person that you love, a student in your class, my last slide is going to be my contact information, and I would love to be able to reach out to you directly so that we can talk about your specific child. Questions about the general information today are really more what we're looking for tonight. So go ahead and open up your chat. You can have your screen, your video on, video off, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I would like you to open the chat for a minute. And the question on the screen is, what is dyslexia? And so I'm curious to hear and see what, oh, you weren't supposed to see that. To be able to name what we think dyslexia is. So go ahead and open the chat and type something in, and let's see what we have. All right. Thank you to Jeff for being the first one. Affects 1 and 5. Thank you, Catherine. All right. So we're seeing words like struggle, trouble, challenge, maybe even disability. All right. I like how people are jumping on the bandwagon with some of what has been put there. Void. I see the word void there. All right. So let me show you the official definition, and then we're going to go from there. Get my screen to do it. There we go. So this jumble of words is the official definition of dyslexia. And I'm going to give you a second to read it, but we're really not going to worry about reading it in its entirety, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to break down this definition into its component parts so that we can understand it more. But I do want to give you a second just to read it through before we move on. So this is the official definition of the International Dyslexia Organization, as well as our state of Virginia. We are using the that same definition. So let's break it down. The first line talked about weakness at the phonological level. So when we talk about phonological awareness, what we're really talking about is understanding the sounds of our language. Dyslexia is a language-based disability. A student is probably going to first show signs of having difficulty playing around with oral language. And so that's what we see on the screen. Because as the skills get harder as we get a little older, it's really going to get to be a challenge. So we're going to see things like phonemic awareness as a problem, problems with phonemes, those individual sounds of our language, onset rhyme, syllables, and even words. So, for example, if we have a student and we give them 3 sounds, w, I, sh, the word is wish. A student with dyslexia might have trouble putting that word together, taking it apart. They might read it as wash or watch or witch or whisk, even as we're just playing with the language orally. So this is kind of one of our first signs, is some struggle with this phonological awareness and playing with words. What happens is this compounds as we kind of move further into reading skills, and it causes great difficulty for our students. So let's see how this works. So I want you to say to yourselves, you don't have to come off of mute, but I've got a picture on the screen. And so that is a picture of a mop. If we have any youngsters who are not familiar, there are 3 phonemes, 3 sounds in the word mop. M, ah, p. It also has three letters. That's just a coincidence, but we're really talking about sounds, three sounds. I want you in your head, or if you're with others, think about how many things you can rhyme with the word mop, whether real words or fake words. Just think for a second, how many words rhyme with mop? All right, so you might have said top or bop or swap, which is spelled differently, but they're still rhyming. So now we're playing with that onset, the beginning of the word, and the rhyme, that consistent ending. And so this is something that we might see as a struggle for a student. Now let's look at this picture. We talked about this being an umbrella term. So here we have an umbrella. Clap out the word umbrella to yourself and see how many syllables are in that word. Umbrella, three syllables. That's not how many sounds are in the word. There are actually six sounds in the word. And then we've got all the letters that make up their sounds. So really what we're talking about is all these challenges that when we're playing with language at this sound level really cause a challenge for students. If somebody here were showing signs of dyslexia and they hadn't had good instruction, those activities probably would have been very challenging. So playing with language, even without letters like we did, does not necessarily come naturally. Another thing to keep in mind is that dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. All that means is that it is a brain-based difference. Now, I want to make sure we hear that that's different and not that there's something wrong with the brain of somebody who is dyslexic, because I will tell you, unlike walking and talking, where our brains are already wired to help us learn to do those things, learning to read is not part of what's in our brain. We are not wired to learn to read. And what happens for someone who is dyslexic is, as we're trying to wire the brain to learn to read, it's going to have some struggle, some struggle doing that. We have to create the pathways a little bit differently for someone who is struggling with dyslexia. Um, so both the left brain, and you can see what the left brain covers, as well as the right brain, they all contribute to learning to read, learning to write, learning to spell, reading out loud, reading silently. And so the sides of the brain have to learn how to work together to read so that we can map those sounds to symbols, to our letters and letter patterns, and to our words and how print works and which way we go in a book. All of those things our brain has to learn. And so for someone with dyslexia, we just have to help that brain wire itself in some different ways. The other piece to know is that when we've done, not me, but when scientists and researchers have done imaging research like MRIs, they have noticed in the brain that different parts of the brain, um, they act differently if one is dyslexic or one has a non-dyslexic brain. And so you can see, as we kind of scan through those different parts of your brain, and you see a neuronormal versus a dyslexic brain, you see that there are some differences there. And so those are the differences that we have to overcome, or help a student overcome if they are struggling with dyslexia. I will tell you right now, before we go any further, that there is no cure for dyslexia. There's no quick fix. It's kind of like having an allergy. It's something that you are living with and you can learn to live with. You can learn strategies, and you can live a very wonderful, full life with dyslexia and be very successful. But we have to build in some strategic instruction and some other things to help someone with dyslexia be able to have that same kind of opportunity. Now, in the classroom, Someone with dyslexia might be noted because a teacher might be noticing that a student isn't reading very fluently. They're reading, but they don't sound like a real reader. They're maybe not so accurate. Their reading is choppy. You might notice poor spelling or decoding as they're writing out words, or if they're reading. Handwriting for someone with dyslexia can also be a struggle. Connecting letters and sounds and remembering those connections can be challenging. Memorizing words, copying words, these are all things that are difficult for someone with dyslexia. Now, what's really interesting about these difficulties is they are not all, at all related to intelligence. So I want to make sure everybody hears that. Someone with dyslexia is very smart, very capable, and just has this specific challenge to overcome, just like somebody else might have another challenge. They can certainly live a full, wonderful life, overcome these literacy challenges, these language processing challenges, with effective instruction. And so we're going to be talking about that as well. The challenge sometimes, many times, for people with dyslexia is it ends up being a snowball effect, which is kind of funny to talk about on a snowy day like this. But for someone with dyslexia, the challenge that it takes to be able to read words, to sound fluent, to sound like a real reader, to be accurate and understand what is read, that's a burden. It can really be a burden. And because of this, someone with dyslexia might be apt to read less, which causes less opportunity to develop text sense, the understanding of fiction versus nonfiction, to develop a good fund of vocabulary and background knowledge that we get through literature and through books. And because of this, what we're noticing is less practice. And so it's almost like as if you've signed up for a race, you've signed up for a marathon, but running is hard. And so you do everything you can to avoid it, but you still have to run the race. And so it's going to take a lot, but avoiding it, that becomes a consequence that snowballs up on itself. So, excuse me, just taking a look at these very cute little graphics here. When we're thinking about our student population, our public school population, in 21-22, in that school year, the 2021-22 school year, the number of students aged 3 through 21 who are receiving special education or related services through the Individuals with Disabilities Act was 7.3 million nationwide. That's about 15% of our school population, our public school population. About 85% of those who are identified as having a disability had a struggle with reading or language processing. So when we think about the challenges that one faces with language and literacy, those kiddos are in a lot of company. There's a lot of folks that at every grade level and even as adults that have struggled to learn to read. So about 15 to 20% of the population struggles in some way with reading, some to the point of dyslexia. And one of the things to keep in mind is you don't have to be specifically diagnosed with dyslexia to be eligible for extra support in reading from our public school. So do keep that in mind. We don't have to name it as dyslexia for someone to be eligible for extra help in learning to read. So what I want to do is ask you all to open the chat, because we're going to move on to the signs of dyslexia. And what I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to do what's called a waterfall chat. So a little different from what we just did before, where I had you put some information in that chat. I'm going to ask you to type one or more signs of dyslexia, but I don't want you to hit the enter button until I say go, because I want it to all kind of waterfall out together. So go ahead and open your chat. Go ahead and type what you know might be a sign that someone might have dyslexia, but don't hit enter until I say go. Okay, go. All right, take a minute to read through our contributions. Confusing words with similar spellings, difficulty rhyming, playing with sounds, laborious reading and decoding, letters sounding in the wrong order, confusing vowels, difficulty breaking down words. Yeah, we've got a lot of symbols here, poor spelling. So let's talk about it. Let's start with our littlest people. So this is what parents might be looking for, early childhood educators, even some of our healthcare professionals might be looking for when we are engaging with students in these early years. And so I'm not going to read them to you. They're right on the screen there. But we might have students who are slow to learn to talk, struggle with directions. Now you say, gosh, Chris, every 2 and 3-year-old, maybe even 4 or 5-year-old, struggles with directions, especially multi-step directions. Struggling with sequences. So I do want to say that not all children with these difficulties have dyslexia, but there may be other challenges or delays in that child's profile. But these are some of our watch signs. Limited vocabulary. They say the word stuff a lot, or that thing, rather than naming the specific object. They don't have a lot of language to use. They have trouble with word games. They have trouble with rhymes and sing songs and singing along with their peers. Those are some of the things that we might see in our littlest kiddos. When we get into kindergarten and first grade, teachers are really on the watch for this. They're looking for kids in circle time activities, whole group, small group, individual learning time, kids who might be having trouble identifying and playing around with those speech sounds in spoken words, pulling words apart, putting the sounds together to make a word, remembering the letter sound correspondence. So if we hold up a letter and we're holding up an M that we know M says and maybe you have a picture that goes along with it, a mouse, having those combinations can be challenging for students. They might be starting to lag behind their peers, and not because they haven't had educational opportunities. Sometimes in kindergarten, we have kids who have not had the benefit of a preschool with a lot of literacy learning, or a home life with a lot of a literacy engagement. And so we always take that kindergarten time to front load and really immerse children in that literate world. But if they're still starting to lag behind their peers, even with this immersion, it might be a sign of a struggle to come. We also might see some kids who are starting to show some frustration or avoidance around reading or doing reading and language things, or just school altogether. So those are some of our indicators. In elementary school, we start to see that kids are having trouble as we're moving up the grades in really with those fundamental reading skills. As we're learning to read, we all start with that robotic sound of word by word by word reading. But over time, we're not building that automatic, fluent, real reader sound. We're not automatic with knowing what letters or letter patterns go together. We're still reading very slowly and choppy. There might still be poor spelling, messy handwriting. These again are signs that we're looking for, that teachers are looking for. And then if we get up into middle school or high school, now we're really having some trouble because kids are reading more slowly. Assignments are starting to compound. They might need extra time to complete assignments, feel very labored. They might have a decreased academic vocabulary as compared to their peers. They might be messy in their organization. They can't follow directions. They have trouble keeping their binder organized as the teacher has asked them to do, especially because in middle school and high school, every class, every teacher kind of has their own way of doing things. There may not be a school-wide system, and this really causes a problem for those with dyslexia. And now we're really starting to show those outward signs of frustration, of avoidance, of anger, of anxiety. So these are just some of the signs. Many of them you already mentioned. With our signs, we take advantage of screening opportunities, testing opportunities throughout our school experience with our kids to look for kiddos who might need more help. So, a literacy screening assessment is designed to measure a student's knowledge. It's like a snapshot of those literacy fundamentals. They provide teachers with a lot of background information to figure out what a student knows, what they're ready for. And we are very lucky in Virginia. We have had a screening tool available to all of our public schools for no charge since the year 2000. And so, for those of you who are educators or have parents who have been in our public elementary schools, you may have seen PALS results. We have a new screener. It is kind of a new iteration of that same assessment. It is called VALS. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But because of Virginia's initiative in literacy, not only have we had a screener available to identify kids who might need more help with reading, but we have state programs available and funding available to all schools for any child in our public schools who's been identified by these screeners as needing more help. So our early intervention reading initiative has been around for over 25 years. It helps us measure those literacy skills through that screener, identifies kids who are at risk, and then figures out how we're going to provide that additional instruction. So we're talking about 150 minutes a week of additional instruction in addition to what happens in the classroom for kids who are showing signs of needing help. What's great about this initiative is, although right now it's at K3, our reading initiative is expanding through our Virginia Literacy Act all the way up to 8th grade. So our screening has gone from PALS to VALS. It's a similar assessment. It's a little bit more robust. And this is the first year our K-3 teachers are using the new assessment. And so you can see on the screen some of the things that a screener will do. Ask a child to write their name, do some work with print concepts. So can they identify letters? We'll do a little bit of spelling, look at alphabet knowledge, look at those rhyming and playing with language, even some passage comprehension. So some short reading passages that a child will read out loud and then answer questions, and really kind of give the teacher a snapshot of where that child is in their literacy journey on that particular day. In Virginia, we require this assessment 6 times, fall and spring in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. We also offer it mid-year if a teacher wants to use it or a division chooses to use it as a kind of a mid-year check-in. It is available up to 3rd grade this year and will be available up to grade 8 next year. And so the tests are developmentally appropriate for the different grade levels and give us a nice glimpse at what a student knows and what they're ready to learn. And so with those results, the teacher and the school is able to determine who is at risk. And then those children are going to receive extra reading help, extra intervention. How that is positioned on a campus is up to the school division. So the materials that they might use, the personnel that they might choose, that is all left up to the school division. So they might use a combination of online readings resources, in-person resources, pull out, push in, lots of different ways to do it. But a child who is falling behind is going to immediately receive intervention once they have been screened and indicated that they need that extra help. So I want to stop for just a second and just check in with Lisa to see if we have any questions before we go past screening.
Yes, so there is one question related to vowels, and that is given the fact that, at least in this person's experience, there are a lot of children identified on the, PA section, the phonological awareness section of
Mhm.
vowels. And are there some efforts to communicate with our pre-K programs across the state and strengthening that area before school entry?
Absolutely. So even though we talk about the Virginia Literacy Act being a K-8 initiative, there is always outreach to our preschools and our early childhood programs and educators, as well as our high school. So we really try to bookend that to ensure that we're reaching all students. So we have great resources and great staff at the Virginia Department of Education championing early childhood education and preschools, both in the public schools as well as out in the private space. And so there's a lot of professional learning available for early childhood educators. And definitely that phonemic awareness is part of that learning that they can engage with. Great question. Anything else, Lisa?
That's all for right now. Thank you.
All right, great. So let's think about how we're going to support these at-risk readers, especially the ones who might be experiencing dyslexia. Before we do that, I love this graphic by Nancy Young. She put together this infographic called The Ladder of Reading and Writing. And the reason I like showing this is when we think about the kind of literacy instruction, explicit and robust literacy instruction that someone with dyslexia needs, we also want to make sure we understand that it is in no way harmful for any other child to have that same rigorous literacy instructional experience. So, although 10 to 15% of our kids are really going to require this intensive instruction, learning to read, learning to spell, learning to be a proficient comprehender really does take effort, and it does take detailed, explicit instruction, no matter how easy it is for any individual to learn to read. We always have those kids, teachers and myself included, always have those kids that just they came in reading. They don't know what happened. The parents say they didn't do anything special, but the kid just started to read, and so that is an anomaly as much as having a reading challenge, a category of dyslexia is an anomaly. It's not the usual. But what we can say is that the instruction that is made available to students with dyslexia or any other kind of reading struggle is not harmful in any way and will not hold anyone back, no matter what kind of effort they need to learn to read. So, if you are an educator in Virginia, I believe you have probably experienced some professional learning in the science of reading. It refers broadly to the research that's available on how we learn to read. There's a lot of scientifically based reading research that hasn't really changed in over 60 years, really showing the rigorous objective methods, strategies, and routines that are necessary to teach reading skills. It's all based on evidence, peer-reviewed studies. This is the kind of stuff that you would want in your healthcare. The tried and true things that will build a reader. That's what we want in all of our classrooms. So as part of the Virginia Literacy Act, there really is an emphasis on the science of reading. And so you can see on the screen that as part of the Virginia Literacy Act, every school division had to put together a plan about how they were going to align their teaching of reading in their schools to the science of reading and the literacy instructional practices that we know work for all kids. And in addition to that, the Virginia Department of Education partnered with educators across the state and the Virginia Literacy Partnership at the University of Virginia to vet some instructional programs that are available throughout the state. The core programs that our general education teachers use, supplements, intervention resources, and they were vetted against that science of reading, that reading research, and those evidence-based practices. So our schools and our school divisions, through the support of funding and the enactment of the Virginia Literacy Act, they are making sure that they're implementing literacy instruction that is really best for all students. So when we think about evidence-based instructions, we want teachers to be able to use what's proven to work, what is going to help prevent reading difficulties before they start, and remediate existing challenges. So this is going to really help close achievement gaps for any child, particularly those who may be falling behind, including children with dyslexia. One of the things that we know is that reading is that gateway skill, and it influences our learning across all subjects. And so this evidence-based reading instruction is going to provide the tools that our kids need to become proficient readers, whether it's in our English language arts class, our social studies class, driver's ed, whatever it might be. We want those practices to help build the skills for all of our kids who are learning to read. So I want to show you a quick video. Before I show it to you, I want to just kind of talk about it. When we talk about intervention and best practices and support for students with dyslexia, the video, I don't want it to be misleading. What you're going to see is one-on-one instruction, one teacher, one learner. But it's not necessary for this instruction to be one-on-one. In fact, the child in this video, as I've been watching it a few times, alludes to the fact that he likes being the only one. I think there are usually 3 or 4 kiddos in this group. So either the parent didn't sign the video waiver, or everybody had the flu or rhinovirus or whatever was going through the school that day. But it is a one-on-one lesson. I just want to show a few excerpts so that you can see what we mean by that instruction and what that evidence-based instruction looks like. So I'm just going to flip over to our video, make sure our sound is on. Go. Just show you a few minutes here. I'm going to jump around a little bit as well.
Okay, now we're going to start with our letter sounds. Okay, name,
Z,
sound,
Z,
name,
S,
sound, name,
V,
sound, name,
F,
sound, name,
T,
sound, name,
N,
sound. Okay, put your eyes. Sound,
I,
name, name,
A,
sound, name,
E,
sound, name,
U,
sound, name,
O,
sound. Now we're going to play a game here. Here's our apple. Ready? A, I, a game, and I'm going to give you the gesture, and you're going to say the sound. You ready? Okay, today we're going to focus on the sound.
So what you saw, and what I really liked about the beginning of this lesson is how it's such a fast-paced review. So this is not the most exciting game, but it's a game that is a really strong warm-up for this child. We're going through what the child knows, and you could tell if you were watching carefully, the teacher has probably in the past, in the last few lessons, noticed that short E, that sound has been a struggle. And so today's lesson is going to be all about that sound. And so I'm going to move forward just a little bit. There we go.
Okay. Separate the sounds in Ben. Go ahead. Okay, be careful with the B. We're not going to say B. We're going to say B. Go ahead. Very good. Now I'm going to leave this here. Now I want you to make the word bet underneath it. We're going to change Ben to bet. Listen for the sound change. Bet. To bet.
So we're playing with language. We aren't even using letter cards at this point. We're just playing with the language here. Then the lesson is going to get into writing.
The letters that make those sounds. What's the first sound you hear in bet? What letter makes that sound?
E.
And what's the last sound you hear in bet? Good.
My John is very nice.
Okay. Say the sounds again. Now I want you to write the letters, but you're going to have say the name of the letter. Go ahead.
So we're going to move on. We know that children often struggle with not just those letter sounds, but memorizing our high frequency words.
Oh, her, when, some.
And these are your new words. This word is there.
I know.
You know that already? Okay, go ahead.
There.
If you come against one you don't know, I'll help you.
Must. Gin.
Put your finger under the first word. I want you to sound it out in your head, and when I tap, you're going to say the word. You ready?
Ben and Jen.
Ben and Jen.
They both rhyme.
They do
They
rhyme.
got some E's and N.
Who do you think Ben is?
This one.
You think that's Ben?
Yeah.
Let's see if you're right. Go ahead. Read.
Jen.
Sometimes we get a little nervous because we think, okay, Ben and Jen, how fascinating can this story be? How robust can the plot line be? That's not what this lesson is about, though. We are really working on strengthening that understanding of the short E and what it does, both alone and within the text, the context of words, and now within sentences. The lesson is going to end with some handwriting.
No line here. I'm going to go straight down, back up, hump, back up, hump. Let me see you do that. Say the words. Back up. Go all the way up to the red line. Back up. All the way up to the red line. Okay, good. We're going to fix this pencil grip here.
All right. So just a quick snippet, just to kind of give you an overview, just kind of be able to see when we're talking about that, the kind of instruction that we need for our students. Oh, we've jumped all the way back to the back. Let's see if we can go to the next one. There we go. The kind of instruction that our students with dyslexia will really need. So what we saw was a very clearly presented lesson of concepts, skills, processes, explanations, modeling. You even heard her model, even the handwriting. Nothing is assumed. You even heard her with the sight words talk about old words, and now we're going to look at new words. And if you need some help, I'm going to help you with those new words. Fast paced. Our kids with dyslexia and other kids who struggle, they do not have time for us to wait. We don't have time for sight word bingo and guessing and giving them extra time. The lesson has to be fast paced. We have a lot to catch up with, and it needs to be robust. We need to keep the kids with us, but what we don't want to do is try to slow things down, because we will never catch up if we slow everything down. The child was receiving immediate feedback. The teacher's following a prescribed sentence, sequence of events, building from simple to complex, and very deliberate with the practice element. So everything there is known. We didn't throw in words that the child doesn't know or sounds that the child doesn't know. Another thing about the lesson is throughout, there's always continuous assessment. It doesn't mean we stop to test, but it means that the teacher is very perceptive and might even just make some notes about what the child is getting really good at and is ready to kind of keep in the rotation, but what might be new? What's the next challenge? Lots of responsive, positive instruction. We want to get to where to the point where mastery is effortless. We want these skills to be automatic. A teacher would adjust their instruction based on data. So if all of a sudden a student like has this surge in learning and we're ready to move a little faster and move on, we're going to do it. If we notice that we've got one area that we're just going to have to bang on a little bit more, we're going to do it. We're not going to let it slow us down, but we're going to keep hammering at it so that we can we can really address it. The other thing you may have noticed as the combination of multiple senses. So you saw the blocks, you saw the hand gestures. We see this a lot in multisensory teaching of literacy. So if we have students with dyslexia, they may be being taught by a teacher who has been additionally trained in the Orton-Gillingham methodology, in multisensory teaching elements. This is above and beyond what a typical teacher would get in their college educational experience. I will put a plug in for every summer. We do offer this multisensory training. We anticipate having that again this summer. So if you are signed up for the Virginia Department of Education's Teacher Direct newsletter, we hope to be able to have this training again this year through our federal funds, and would be announcing it later this spring if that's something that you're interested in. Another thing that we work on when we're thinking about students with dyslexia, as well as all kids, we all need to understand the structures of our language. So really getting into grammar, the pragmatics of our language, why words are put in a certain order, the idioms of our language, the intended meaning of text, even things like punctuation, how the end punctuation will really change the meaning of a sentence. We need to be able to explicitly teach that. For our older kids, once we get past about second grade and above, not just looking at letters, but the combinations of syllables. And there are rules to our syllables. And so we clearly teach those syllable types and what they do, and we help kids look for how to use them, as well as with our older kids, morphology. You may have had some instruction in Greek and Latin roots and prefixes and suffixes. This helps us not just build a richer vocabulary fund, but it also provides another strategy for our older learners, for our upper elementary, middle, and high school learners, to something to do when they encounter an unfamiliar word. So if they know that the letters UN say un, that's great. They can read it. But do they also know what un means? And that can help them as they're looking at new words, especially in science and social studies. Now, while kids are receiving this robust, intensive intervention to bring their skills along so that they become proficient, skilled readers, we might also be putting accommodations in place. So, an accommodation is an adjustment or a support that's put in place to help a student succeed in the classroom without changing the standards or expectations for that child. So these are ways that we allow a student to really show us what they know, demonstrate their knowledge, demonstrate their skill, but without the hindrance that comes along with their dyslexia, with the kind of challenges that they are having. So when we think about accommodations, it might be an alternative text format. It might be providing an audiobook, note-taking support, text-to-speech software, a recording of something that they can listen to before they come into the classroom. It might also mean adjusted assignments. So especially for our kids who are in upper elementary, middle, and high, it might be a condensed version of a text, or instead of 20 questions, we're going to do 12. So there are accommodations that we can put in place. Some more, especially when it comes to testing, our kiddos might need extra time to complete tests or assignments. Verbal instructions might be challenging, so we might have instructions with pictures or graphic descriptions. We might allow a student to provide oral answers that they record or that they tell another teacher rather than writing them down, if that writing is going to be a hindrance for them showing what they know. Also, adjusted readability. So we might be reading Beowulf, but a child might be reading a different version of Beowulf that is the same text, the same story, but we've adjusted the readability so that instead of at an upper high school level, maybe it's at a middle or elementary school level. So they're still getting the gist, they're still getting the plot, but we're making that accommodation so that it is readable. The accommodations would be put in place through an IEP or a 504 plan. So as part of the planning and decision making, accommodations would be considered to support that student alongside the additional instruction that they are reading, that they are receiving. Assistive technology. You saw at the end of the video, the teacher was talking about the pencil grip. Something as simple as a pencil grip, a highlighter, an index card, a bookmark. These are examples of assistive technology. There are also assistive technologies that you and I use every day. If you pick up your phone and you are dictating a message into your phone, that is assistive technology. And so we see that many of us are using assistive technology in our daily life. It doesn't necessarily have to be any different for a student with dyslexia. So a text-to-speech tool, a speech-to-text tool for students who are having difficulty getting all of their ideas out in writing. It would let them speak their ideas, which are then converted into text. Another thing to keep in mind with assistive technology is that we might be considering what a text might look like. So there are actually dyslexia-friendly fonts, some that are a little bit easier for someone with dyslexia to read than others. Lots of software or apps for note-taking, for reading, for writing. Electronic graphic organizers are great. Creating visual representations when we take notes. You might notice, teachers, that you have a student who is not necessarily taking down word representations when they're taking notes, but making pictures and squiggles and sketches along the way. Totally appropriate accommodations. Now, for kids who are really struggling, we have a program in Virginia called AIM-VA. It is accessible instructional reading materials that a student with dyslexia might be eligible for through their IEP. And so these might be digital readers, alternative print format. It might be a video, an audio file for a student. And so some kids are eligible for these materials to be made. Even study guides for some of our standards of learning in science and social studies are available. So do keep that in mind, that that might be something helpful for our students. One thing we have to keep in mind, whether the student is, preschool all the way up through high school and beyond, the impact of having dyslexia, of having these daily challenges with reading and language and writing and spelling, can really affect a person's personal life. Children and adults with dyslexia can face challenges that are not just academic, but also very social or emotionally oriented. Struggling with basic reading and writing tasks that are part of everyday life in a classroom can be struggling and can really impact one's self-image. It might make a child think that, hey, I'm not smart. I can't do what my peers are doing. They may feel diminished self-worth. They may struggle with wanting to go to school, staying in school, keeping up with their work. We may find that peers are not always kind, and so we may have to navigate that. Fear of being judged, fear of somebody calling on you and having to read aloud is a nightmare for a student who's struggling to read, especially a student with dyslexia. And we can help that by saying, hey, tomorrow I'm going to ask you to read page 6 of Beowulf or something that we're going to read in class. And you give that child the out of being able to practice it beforehand so that they can show their success in the classroom. So we don't want to really just focus on the academic impact, but we really want to keep in mind the social impact of dyslexia and the importance of having the support of teachers, friends, family, who really understand that this is just a condition. It's not everything about this child, but there can be negative social and emotional consequences. So any kind of positive reinforcement, acknowledgement of their strengths, anything to boost their confidence and help them with their successes is really going to help that emotional well-being. So for our kids with dyslexia, our adults with dyslexia, we talk about when a door is closed or where a door is jammed, a window is sometimes open. And that's one thing that we really have to take into account for people with dyslexia, because just like if you have diabetes or you have an allergy, there's more to that person than that obstacle. People with dyslexia are often very creative. They have good problem-solving skills. They are innovative. They have built strong verbal communication and storytelling abilities because getting things down on paper can be hard. So sometimes they are just incredible storytellers. Now, when I was a kid, this guy was like the coolest thing on TV. To find out the Fonz, who so many young ladies my age kind of had a picture, a poster on the wall, which probably wasn't all that appropriate because I think he was probably 30 when he played this really cool character. But Henry Winkler, the actor, is dyslexic. And he talks a lot about his dyslexia and his impacts. He is an author. He's a children's author. He's really embraced his dyslexia and made it not an obstacle, but something that he's very proud of. Albert Einstein was dyslexic. Octavia Spencer is dyslexic. Muhammad Ali was dyslexic. Steven Spielberg, Jennifer Aniston. There's lots of people who are dyslexic. And the other thing we would just want to keep in mind is there are lots of people in our communities who are dyslexic and they are leading fabulous lives. They are supportive in their communities and with their families. And so we don't want to just think of these people, these famous people. There are everyday people who have dyslexia and overcome these challenges in everything that they do. So when we think about dyslexia, we kind of went through a lot today, but I also want to make sure that you know that every school division has a dyslexia advisor. Every division had to name a dyslexia advisor. Some have more than just one. Many of our reading specialists at the elementary and middle school are also dyslexia advisors. They have additional training in those signs to look for and how to address the signs of dyslexia. Our website, the Virginia Department of Education website, has a dyslexia page and a dyslexia available, dyslexia awareness module. The International Dyslexia Association has fabulous resources for parents, for teachers. Please go to their website. We have a great chapter in Virginia. The Reading League, we also have a fabulous chapter in Virginia. Lots of great resources there. There are audiobooks, there are podcasts, there are parent groups. You might ask your division's dyslexia advisor to point you in the direction of some parent groups, some support groups, if that is something that you are looking for. And lastly, I want to make sure you have my contact information, because if you want to learn more about dyslexia, if you want to talk about a student who is close to your heart, I would love to work with you and see what we can do to support you or your student. Or if you're a teacher, what some of the available professional learning experiences are so that you can help your students. So thank you all. I think we've left some good time for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. And we do have a few questions that have come up in the chat. And
Okay.
so one of them would be, if a parent is suspecting their child may have dyslexia, what would you recommend as a good first step?
I would make an appointment to talk to the classroom teacher, because you see your child every day and that teacher is seeing that child 180 days of the year. And so teachers are always very willing to partner with parents and have that conversation. So if you do suspect that your child may have dyslexia, may have some kind of a weakness when it comes to literacy or language, start with the classroom teacher. If your student is in K-3, we already have those VALS assessment reports. That could be something you go through. We could look at student work and then talk about what the next steps might be for intervention. Or, if we're really starting to suspect that the student has a disability, the next step would be putting that in writing to the teacher and copying the principal, the assistant principal, or the special education lead for that school and saying, hey, I really think that my child may have a learning disability. And that is going to prompt a process of exploring that from that academic side, from the physical side. I mean, it could be your child may need glasses. There's a lot of things to look at, but parents and teachers partner every day to support students. And so that's the first good step.
Thank you. What is an easy way for people to find out who their division dyslexia advisor is?
I would probably start with either the reading specialist in your building or your principal. You could, in some divisions, I see that I can put in dyslexia advisor and a name will pop up. Some of our school divisions, especially our smaller divisions, people wear multiple hats. So they could be the director of special education, the director of finance and budget, and the dyslexia advisor. So, it really depends on your division, but your reading specialist in your building will probably know who that is.
Mhm. Thank you. Another question that had come up earlier was related to things that are, I guess, comorbidities. So a child who may have dyslexia and ADHD, and also a child who is experiencing a high level of anxiety because of, their dyslexia. So are there specific resources that you might direct someone to related to that?
Sure. We think about comorbidity, that word we all learned back in 2020, which really just means that, we've got these compounding influences. So not only are we having language processing trouble, but we're having anxiety or we're having attentional issues. And that is very common for someone with dyslexia. It's not just kind of a monolith that we see it happen in one way. And again, that the struggle, the conversation about the struggle can begin with the classroom teacher, because we want to make sure that we're mitigating not just the academic, the literacy side of it, but also the behavioral side, because that attention is going to be important as we work through this robust instruction. We want to bring down the anxiety, help the student feel successful. So definitely talking with the classroom teacher and really laying out not just the literacy struggles, but the behavior struggles that you might be seeing when a child is asked to read at home, to complete homework, going to the library, whatever it might be.
Okay, thank you. Another question that's sort of more general is if someone is interested in learning more about dyslexia and also about the science of reading, do you have several books that you feel like are the ones that you tend to recommend to people to start with?
Oh, sure. I really, anything written by Dr. Sally Shaywitz is something to start with. She is really a guru when it comes to dyslexia. That's the author that is kind of sitting right in the front of my head. Of course, at 8 o'clock on a snowy night, my brain's a little bit snowy. But I would ask that person to just reach out to me, and I can give you 10 titles. Keep your bookshelf stocked.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know we have, I'm going to end with one question and then I'm going to recommend that we have some other really great questions that we will be sharing, your contact information. And so people may want to reach out as well. But just for clarification, you spoke earlier this evening about a student who is having difficulty reading and might need intervention or even one-on-one, and who can qualify for those services without having an IEP. But this question has to do with can a student qualify for services with dyslexia, with a dyslexia diagnosis?
What I want to make sure we understand is that we can back off of the need for a dyslexia diagnosis. Any school division that is asking for a doctor's note, a brain scan, an outside, referral, that is not necessary. Our school divisions have the capacity to do robust testing past that screening. Just like, we all go into the doctor and we get screened, they check our height, our weight, our blood pressure. And if something's going on, the tests are going to start to get deeper and more concentrated in those areas. Our school divisions have the capacity. Our school psychologists have at the ready the kind of assessments that will help us delve into language processing difficulties, memory difficulties, literacy difficulties, because like we said, dyslexia doesn't show up in every kid the same way. We used to think that every kid who was dyslexic mixed up their B's and D's. That's not necessarily true. We have kids who can read really well. They can read the words, but they don't understand what they read. So dyslexia shows up in different ways. And so we don't have to have somebody name it dyslexia for it to be categorized as a specific learning disability and addressed through an IEP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you again to Chris Mooney for presenting this evening and to this very informative workshop, and for those of you who attended. I did want to let you know that we will have another workshop on March 19th titled Anatomy of an IEP. And so we hope that you will consider joining us for that as well. Want to also just recognize again that this is made possible by the Ruth Harris Professorship at Virginia Commonwealth University. This evening, those of you who have attended will receive an email with a survey to give us some feedback, and that will also allow you to receive a certificate of attendance. And if there are questions that have been posted in the chat that I can answer, I will follow up with you. And if not, I will also make sure, again, that you have Chris's information and that she's a wonderful resource for us. So Thank you all very much for being here. And thank you again, Chris, for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for having me. It was great to spend some time with all of you, and I hope the information was helpful.
Very much so.
Good night, everybody.